People often argue that ufology cannot be considered a science because UFO sightings appear unpredictable and don't seem to follow clear rules that can be studied or tested.
You won't believe what this damn thing did when it flew over me.
What did it do?
Yet the wave of sightings that took place in the Hudson Valley, north of New York City, tells a different story. During the early 1980s, thousands of witnesses reported seeing huge V-shaped and circular light formations, some reportedly as large as football fields. These sightings weren't scattered randomly. They appeared in clusters, often returned to the same locations, and frequently happened on the same days of the week. While the reason for these patterns remains unknown, they suggest that UFO activity may follow a structure that science has not yet identified.
Witnesses refuse to accept the possibility that these are also the lights of the airplanes.
I know what it wasn't. It wasn't an ultralight. It wasn't a blimp. It wasn't gas. No one's tried to tell me what it was, but I know what it wasn't.
Investigators have subjected the videotaped images of the hoax and the unidentified lights to various computer analyses. By digitalization of the images, they hope to be able to determine if the area between the lights of the UFO was solid, indicating one craft. The airplanes, they hope, would show night sky in the center of the lights. Physicist Al Hibbs.
Pictures like this, night sky, a few lights, taken with a television camera that was perhaps being moved, not deliberately, but accidentally while it was taking the picture. There's really nothing you can say about these things. In one case, a very good explanation is offered, and I see no reason to disbelieve it. In the other case, there's no explanation. I certainly can't offer one. I would love it if some UFOs were extraterrestrial objects being piloted by extraterrestrial beings. I think that'd be the most marvelous discovery of the history of man. I'd love to have that be true. So I'm not going to say that foreign objects, artifacts made by intelligent creatures in the solar system, I'm not going to say that's preposterous. I'm going to say it is so unusual, so immensely important, that I'm not going to assign any sightings like this to that phenomenon without a lot more data.
Insufficient data, the object remains unidentified. For government officials, therefore, it is of no consequence. But for the New York eyewitnesses, the question of what it is remains. They find the government's apparent lack of interest puzzling.
The government didn't come to me as a rational individual. Now, as an accountant, I like concrete things. I like evidence. For them to say that I didn't see anything without really talking to me and investigating it means that they were trying to hide something. And that was my feeling from the very beginning.
They know something, okay? They know something. Either they know that there's something up there, and they want to investigate it themselves and don't want other people trying to handle it, or they're doing something. But if they're doing something, then let people know about it.
The first documented Hudson Valley sighting took place shortly before midnight on December 31st, 1981. An off-duty police officer, whose identity was never released, was at home with his family in Kent, New York, when they noticed a boomerang-shaped craft moving slowly overhead. They reported seeing a solid object with roughly 15 red, green, and white lights attached underneath. It remained at an altitude of about 150 meters, traveled at little more than walking speed, and produced only a faint humming sound. During the sighting, the colored lights suddenly vanished and were replaced by 3 intense white lights arranged in a triangle. Around 5 seconds later, the original lights returned, and the object continued drifting away until it disappeared from view. Only moments later, 55-year-old Edwin Hansen encountered what appeared to be the same object while driving along Interstate 84. Hansen and several other motorists pulled over after noticing a giant boomerang-shaped arrangement of lights projecting a bright beam toward the ground. The object was so enormous that it seemed to fill the entire sky ahead of him, and it moved in slow, tight circles. As Hansen wondered what it would be like to see it up close, the object began moving toward him. Frightened, he watched it approach until he suddenly heard what seemed to be a voice inside his head telling him not to fear it. At that exact moment, the object turned away and the beam disappeared. Hansen later said he felt thoughts that did not belong to him and became convinced that the UFO had communicated with him telepathically. In the years that followed, many other witnesses described similar experiences or believed the objects somehow knew what they were thinking. Almost 2 months later, on February 26, 1982, Monique O'Driscoll and her daughter encountered another strange object while driving along rural roads. They followed the illuminated craft for several miles and watched as it passed directly over their vehicle. When it stopped above a frozen lake, Monique stepped out to observe it more closely. She described an object covered with around 50 red, blue, and amber lights, with a large amber light positioned at its center. It measured roughly 60 to 90 meters across and was completely silent. Underneath, she could see metal beams and crisscrossing supports that reminded her of the underside of a bridge. As the object began moving away, she silently wished it would stay. At that exact moment, it turned back and flew toward her. When fear set in, it retreated again. Several nearby witnesses reported seeing the same object at the same time, including later sightings as it crossed Interstate 84. Police departments in Kent and Carmel, New York, as well as Danbury, Connecticut, were flooded with UFO reports that evening. The sightings returned the following spring. On March 17, 1983, a woman in Brewster, New York, reported seeing a V-shaped object covered in lights displaying every color imaginable along its wings, with one bright light in the center. The object then made a sharp turn and moved toward the home of Dennis Sant, the deputy clerk of Putnam County. Earlier that evening, Sant had already noticed the object hovering above his property and admitted feeling a strong urge to go outside and search for it. He eventually spotted it over Interstate 84 and rushed inside to bring his family out to see it. As soon as he wished he could get a better look, the craft rotated toward him and slowly approached before stopping only about 12 meters away. The object measured just under 40 meters in length and stretched more than 100 meters across. Red, green, and white lights lined its sides, while an amber light swept from one end of the V to the other. While hovering nearby, the lights grew roughly 3 times brighter. Sant and his father were close enough to make out its dark metallic surface and hear what sounded like a finely tuned engine. A week later, on March 24th, another major wave of sightings occurred, particularly around Yorktown. Numerous witnesses, including Yorktown police officers, reported receiving a huge number of calls about a large boomerang-shaped object displaying red, blue, and green lights. Authorities in the nearby village of Newcastle experienced the same flood of reports. Witnesses consistently described an object comparable in size to a football field. Meteorologist Bill Helly observed an uneven V-shaped object estimated to be about 400 meters long and carrying 6 or 7 lights. The object descended from roughly 600 meters to 300 meters while slowing down as it approached. Healy noticed that each light changed color independently, almost as if a rotating prism inside the structure was creating the effect. Then, without warning, every light vanished at once, leaving nothing visible behind, as though the structure itself had disappeared. Around 30 to 40 seconds later, the lights returned. Moments afterward, the object turned northward and departed while its lights shifted to a slimy green color. At the same time, witnesses about 15 miles away in Putnam County reported seeing a smaller object displaying many of the same characteristics. The number of reports that night was so large that local media finally began paying attention. On March 26th, both the Westchester Rockland Daily Item and the North County News published articles about the sightings. That same evening, the mysterious lights appeared once again. The publicity attracted the attention of amateur UFO researcher Philip J. Imbrogno. Working alongside J. Allen Hynek, the former scientific consultant for the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, as well as investigators from Hynek's Center for UFO Studies, Imbrogno began gathering witness testimony. The group established 2 dedicated phone lines and published witness accounts in local newspapers. Within the first 10 hours after publication, they received more than 100 calls. Eventually, over 300 reports connected specifically to the March 24th sightings were collected. Based on the volume of responses, investigators estimated that several thousand people may have witnessed the phenomenon that night. Researchers found that roughly 85% of the reports came from an area smaller than 60 square kilometers in Westchester and Putnam counties, mainly along the Taconic Parkway. Most witnesses described the same type of boomerang-shaped object traveling at speeds between 20 and 50 kilometers per hour. In many cases, the objects were seen hovering above lakes, reservoirs, and other bodies of water. Although the overall descriptions were similar, the behavior reported by witnesses varied considerably. People described lights suddenly jumping to different positions in the sky, vanishing and reappearing without moving, and releasing smaller illuminated objects capable of independent movement. Some observers even watched individual lights separate from the formation and fly on their own. On October 26th, one group witnessed 7 white lights passing overhead. The center light remained fixed in position while the 6 surrounding lights moved independently, jumping around before eventually returning to formation and continuing on together. Other witnesses reported seeing a small red object, described as a probe, detach itself from a larger UFO. 2 days later, on October 28th, biomedical engineer Jim Book observed a huge boomerang-shaped object covered with lights hovering over the Croton Falls Reservoir. The craft was at least 30 meters long and carried 9 red lights along its sides. It moved around the reservoir while staying approximately 4.5 meters above the water's surface. Each time it paused, it released a cherry red light and projected what appeared to be a screen or beam from its underside that seemed to interact with the water below. The object remained completely silent throughout the encounter. Book also noticed that its lights shut off whenever another vehicle passed nearby. The Yorktown police eventually concluded that the Hudson Valley UFO sightings were simply a group of aircraft flying in formation, although they could never identify who was operating them. Meanwhile, the Putnam County Police claimed the lights belonged to a formation of ultralight aircraft. That explanation raised questions because ultralights are highly affected by wind and are extremely difficult to fly in a perfectly steady formation. They also produce a lawnmower-like engine sound that should have been easy to hear during most of the reported sightings. The Federal Aviation Administration repeatedly told law enforcement that the lights were caused by unidentified airplanes or helicopters. The agency later launched its own investigation into the sightings, but never released any public findings. Police departments in Brewster and Carmel reported being told by an official at Stewart Air Force Base that the lights were aircraft being relocated from the base. However, other personnel at Stewart denied that explanation. In April 1983, a group of private pilots flew over the region in a V-shaped formation as a prank designed to convince residents they were witnessing UFOs. Yet many witnesses interviewed by Imbrogno's research team had observed both the prank flights and the unexplained objects, and they said the two were clearly different. During the following 4 months, residents continued reporting similar formations of aircraft. Many believed these flights were part of an organized attempt to muddy the waters. During a major wave of sightings on Halloween night in 1984, a small aircraft landed at Stormville Airport near the area where one of the objects had been reported. A state trooper questioned the pilot and accused him of creating the sightings. The pilot denied any involvement and no charges were filed. Even so, skeptics later pointed to the trooper's report as evidence that the events were a hoax. Interest in the original wave of sightings gradually faded over the months that followed. Then, on March 25, 1984, almost exactly 1 year after the first major outbreak, a new wave began. Additional sightings continued throughout the summer. This time, witnesses described a wider range of shapes and movements than before. Reports collected by Imbrogno's team included X-shaped objects, cross formations, and circular arrangements of lights. One cross-shaped formation was even recorded on video. Some witnesses claimed that hovering objects shined beams of light down onto them. On March 25th alone, an estimated 200 to 300 people reported seeing a UFO over the Taconic Parkway. The Carmel Police Department received at least 20 calls and observed the object themselves. One lieutenant stated that he was convinced it was not a conventional aircraft. More reports followed on March 31st, with many additional sightings occurring throughout the summer months. On June 11th, 1984, a massive V-shaped formation of lights passed over a town board meeting in New Castle County. Several police officers witnessed the object, and an airport in a neighboring county reportedly detected it on radar. Then, on July 12th, July 19th, and July 24th, witnesses across New York and Connecticut reported seeing circular formations of lights. Imbrogno and Hynek estimated that roughly 5,000 people witnessed the first of those events alone. At least a dozen police officers were among the witnesses, including Danbury County Chief Nelson Macedo. Macedo was fishing on Candlewood Lake with relatives and friends when they spotted a circular object high above them. The object appeared to be surrounded by 20 to 30 multicolored lights. Although the lights seemed to rotate, the object itself remained stationary. At one point, the boat operator switched off the vessel's lights, and the lights on the object appeared to go dark as well. When the boat lights were turned back on, the lights overhead returned. The same pattern repeated several times. On July 24th, Brewster resident Bob Pozzuoli succeeded in capturing some of the lights on film. Later that summer, Imbrogno joined forces with attorney and ufologist Peter Gersten to organize a conference in Brewster. Their goal was to draw attention to the repeated waves of UFO reports. Journalist Andy Blum covered the event plans, which quickly attracted interest from news organizations across the region. More than 1,500 people attended the conference on August 25th, including over 75 reporters representing outlets such as the New York Times, ABC, and the Chicago Tribune. During the conference, investigators presented Pozzuoli's footage, which was later shown on television news broadcasts. When HBO produced a UFO special in 1985, the network sent the film to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena for analysis. A specialist examined the footage, but was unable to determine what the lights were. Both the New York State Police and the FAA were invited to participate in the conference, but neither agency accepted. Even so, the event generated widespread media attention, and the publicity led to additional reports reaching the investigators. The researchers also discovered that workers and security personnel at the Indian Point nuclear reactor complex had witnessed an object hovering over the facility on 2 separate occasions in June. During those incidents, the site's security systems reportedly stopped functioning. More sightings occurred the night after the conference, but reports soon became less frequent, and the number of sightings continued to decline over the next several years. Then, on March 21st, 1985, Imbrogno's team finally experienced a sighting firsthand. Shortly after leaving the University of Bridgeport to appear on a television call-in program about the UFO reports, the group spotted a circular object surrounded by lights hovering above a 15-story building. They watched it rotate in the sky and then pursued it along the interstate. Hynek and Imbrogno later joined forces with journalist Bob Pratt to document their investigation in a book. Hynek passed away in 1986 before it was completed, but the book was released the following year and became the final publication to carry his name. Although reports of sightings became less common after 1984, Imbrogno kept gathering accounts from Hudson Valley residents for many years, and people still report sightings there today. Imbrogno's reputation suffered after it was revealed that many of the scientific and military qualifications he claimed to have were not real. Even so, critics of UFO research have struggled to dismiss the reports he gathered. Philip Klass, one of the most well-known UFO skeptics, admitted that the Hudson Valley cases might be among the most difficult UFO reports ever recorded to explain. Most attempts to solve the mystery have relied on the theory that witnesses were seeing unusual aircraft formations, a suggestion that Discover magazine promoted in a 1984 article. In 1992, Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment about the Hudson Valley incidents and interviewed several police officers who reported seeing the objects themselves, adding weight to their testimony. After examining thousands of reports, Imbrogno and his team noticed several recurring trends. One of the clearest patterns involved the shape of the objects. Witnesses repeatedly described large triangular or boomerang-shaped craft, while others reported circular objects. Similar sightings had been reported across several southern states since the mid-1970s, and records of comparable objects in the United States stretch back to at least 1951. Only a few years later, Belgium experienced a major UFO wave during 1989 and 1990. Many witnesses there described large black triangular craft that behaved very much like the objects reported in the Hudson Valley. Then, in 1997, thousands of people in Phoenix, Arizona, reported seeing a massive V-shaped object illuminated with lights moving across the sky. Not every witness in the Hudson Valley described the same thing, however. A building inspector in Torrington, Connecticut, reported seeing a cigar-shaped craft with 4 windows. Security personnel at the Indian Point nuclear facility described an object shaped like an ice cream cone. Some witnesses were convinced there was a solid craft behind the lights, while others believed there was no visible structure at all. Whether these differences resulted from observation errors or reflected several different types of objects remains unknown. The sightings also showed unusual geographic and timing patterns. Reports were heavily concentrated in specific parts of the Hudson Valley. They were also far more likely to occur on Sunday, Monday, and Thursday nights than on other days of the week. Even more puzzling, several of the busiest sighting nights in 1984 occurred almost exactly on the same dates as the busiest nights in 1983. Researchers have never found a satisfactory explanation for these unusual patterns, nor have they explained why so many reports came from roughly the same 3,600 square kilometer area of the Hudson Valley. Imbrogno's team pointed out that some of the most active locations contained large amounts of government-owned land. These areas are rich in iron ore and contain numerous abandoned mines. Local residents also reported a higher than normal number of electrical disturbances in these locations. Another common feature of the reports involved claims of telepathic communication. Many witnesses believed they had exchanged thoughts or messages with the objects they observed. Similar claims appear frequently in UFO cases and have led some researchers to suggest that an intelligence may be connected to the phenomenon and capable of interacting directly with the human mind. Imbrogno's investigators also collected reports involving so-called missing time, along with unusual dreams and alleged abduction experiences that happened around the same period as the sightings. At the time, reports of alien abductions were still poorly understood and rarely studied in depth. Hynek noted that these kinds of strange and difficult-to-explain experiences often appeared alongside UFO reports. He referred to them as examples of high strangeness, a category of events that remained particularly difficult to account for. More than 3 decades later, the Hudson Valley sightings of the early and mid-1980s are still considered some of the most studied and longest-lasting UFO cases ever documented. Many reports came from trained observers and multiple independent witnesses. Some sightings were also supported by radar data. In addition, the information gathered by Hynek and Imbrogno suggested that the activity followed several unusual yet recognizable patterns. We still cannot predict when or where a UFO sighting will occur. At the same time, the Hudson Valley report suggests that the phenomenon does not appear completely random. There may be a system behind it that we have not yet figured out, and until that changes, the mystery remains unsolved. Recently in Brazil, a bright object was recorded moving across the sky in clear daylight conditions. The footage shows a metallic-looking craft hovering at a steady height, staying stable with no visible wings, rotors, or exhaust trail. Its shape appears elongated with a smooth surface that reflects sunlight, giving it a golden tone. At times, the object shifts slightly in position, then holds still again as if maintaining a fixed point in the air. The camera zoom reveals a solid structure rather than a balloon or conventional aircraft. No navigation lights or standard aviation markings are visible. In a second recording, a similar object is seen higher in the sky, moving faster and then slowing down without a clear pattern of acceleration. It briefly changes direction, rising into thinner cloud cover before reappearing through gaps in the clouds. In another sequence, 2 fast-moving aircraft are seen approaching the object. The unidentified craft remains ahead of them and continues moving upward. The jets follow, but do not close the distance. Throughout the sightings, the object remains silent, with no visible smoke, vapor, or engine output. It maintains controlled movement, alternating between hovering and rapid ascent before disappearing into cloud cover. So thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.